Hello and good morning. You are very welcome to Eurochild's second webinar this week, where we are tackling the very important issue of child poverty. Today's event is hosted with the Eurochild member from Spain, Plataforma de Infancia. Now, a couple of things for housekeeping first. My name is Jennifer Baker. I will be your moderator this morning. And I want to remind everyone that there is simultaneous translation into both English and Spanish. To find that, it's at the bottom of your screen. There's a small globe. If you click on that, you have the options for original, for English, and for Spanish. You can leave it switched on throughout, so there's no need to switch it on and off, depending on what language you would like to hear. A reminder to all our speakers to allow a little bit of time for the interpreters not to speak too quickly and to be as clear as possible. I'm sure that will be the case anyway. We also want you to be interactive this morning, so follow us on social media, use the hashtag Putting Children First to send your messages and thoughts, and encourage other friends and colleagues to join in and follow along with today's webinar. We also, as well as asking you to answer some poll questions to get a sense of people's priorities in this area, we'll also be encouraging you to use the Q&A function to ask questions of our panelists, which will come in the second part of this morning's session. But feel free to start putting questions in there if you think there are important issues, which of course there are, that you would like to see answered. Now, only panelists will be visible and able to speak, but do use that Q&A function to put your questions in writing. We are fortunate to have some young people participating today in both the audience and later on the panel. Looking forward to hearing from them. Alice is our child protection focal point, ensuring that all the young people feel safe and happy. You can write to her on the email that she has just posted in the chat function. If you can't find the chat function, it's the little icon also at the bottom of your screen. You can email Alice if you have any concerns or questions there. Please note that participation is, of course, voluntary. No one will be forced to answer any questions they don't want to. This idea is to get a really good dialogue, and we want input and exchange. So if you want to send something, you can put that in the chat function as well. Please keep your microphones and cameras turned off. That's to speakers and panelists when you're not speaking, to avoid feedback or unfortunate technical issues. And with that, I think we are ready to hand over to our host today. Once again, Her Excellency Marie-Louise Guillermo-Preca. I don't think I mentioned it yesterday, of course, as well as being president of Eurochild, was former president of Malta. And during her time there, she founded the President's Foundation for the Wellbeing Society. I forgot to mention that yesterday, and my apologies. Marie-Louise, I will hand over to you to introduce the Spanish viewpoints from His Excellency.
Thank you so very much, Jennifer. Good morning to all of our friends and colleagues from Spain and across Europe. We're really so pleased to welcome our eminent speakers and participants to Eurochild's second webinar, which is being held on the occasion of World Children's Day 2020. Today, we will be addressing our belief that tackling child poverty is fundamental to overcoming the crisis and subsequently to achieve inclusive prosperity and peaceful coexistence. We therefore are being asked to respond to the question, why tackling child poverty is a prerequisite to sustainably exit the crisis. We are proud that Eurochild is co-hosting today's webinar with our Spanish national partner network, the Plataforma de Infancia. We are proud of Plataforma de Infancia as it is an organization which shows activism and leadership in its work to champion children's rights. I must admit that today's topic is at the very heart of Eurochild's DNA. Tackling child poverty and social exclusion and promoting children's well-being has been one of our core objectives since Eurochild's network came into being. Eurochild believes that Europe is at a historical crossroad. It is a moment where Europe needs to decide where it wants its societies to be in 10 and 20 years' time. The high levels of child poverty on our continent cannot be ignored any longer. We are very worried. Nearly 1 in 4 children in the European Union alone are at risk of poverty or social exclusion. Moreover, this is a pre-pandemic indicator. This is a clear indication of deep-rooted structural socio-economic challenges, which unfortunately, I believe, have been left simmering for far too long. On the other hand, research is showing us that the pandemic has not only brought new and unprecedented challenges, but also has exacerbated poverty, social exclusion, and other inequalities. The current realities are showing that more and more children are falling out of the empowerment and protective systems. This situation is compounding our worries. The COVID-19 pandemic has undoubtedly imposed a huge strain on Europe's social and I'm very sorry. It seems I wasn't being heard. So I will try to. Nearly 1 in 4 children in the European Union alone are at risk of poverty or social exclusion. Moreover, this is a pre-pandemic indicator, and this is clear indication of deep-rooted structural socio-economic challenges, which unfortunately, I believe, have been left simmering for far too long. On the other hand, research is showing us that the pandemic has not only brought new and unprecedented challenges, but has also exacerbated poverty, social exclusion, and other inequalities. The current realities are showing that more and more children are falling out of the empowerment and protective systems. This situation is compounding our worries. The COVID-19 pandemic has undoubtedly imposed a huge strain on Europe's social and economic fabric, and is exposing inherent weaknesses with far-reaching effects, including on children's well-being. Yet we are hopeful, because President von der Leyen and her Commission are committed to address child poverty by introducing a European child guarantee. The European Union is therefore standing on the brink of taking up the opportunity to do more for children. The commitment of the European Union Commission to create a European child guarantee could be the most promising initiative that the European Union has ever given to the issue of child poverty. This year, Eurochild members from 25 countries have contributed to a report entitled Growing Up in Lockdown, Europe's Children in the Age of COVID-19. In this report, our members are highlighting their worrisome concerns about the surge of children and families experiencing financial difficulties, mental health problems, domestic violence, educational and digital divide. Children in vulnerable situations, such as children in alternative care, have been deeply affected by these challenges, as well as with social distancing and lockdown measures and lack of adequate support services. We are therefore keen that the efforts to be made to improve the lives of children in our countries are done in a coordinated and holistic manner to reflect the multidimensional nature of the problems that children are facing. We need the necessary political will and political determination from our governments to build the much needed national strategies for tackling child poverty and social exclusion, together with set targets for reducing it. It is essential that public budgets, including that of the European Union, is mobilized to invest in children. Eurochild is keen to see European Union countries invest resources from the next generation EU recovery packages, as well as through the next 7-year budget in reforms aimed at ending child poverty. We are keen to see that the European Child Guarantee, aiming at leaving no one behind, will bring together important components such as the realization of the political and commitment, the mobilization of the European Union and national resources, strategic thinking and planning, and a trigger for deeper structural reforms. Indeed, investing in children and tackling child poverty is undoubtedly a prerequisite to sustainably exit this unprecedented crisis. I am honored to introduce a video address by the Prime Minister of Spain, His Excellency, Mr. Pedro Sánchez, which was recorded specifically for our event today. It is encouraging to know that heads of government, like the Prime Minister of Spain, is so much incongruent with Eurochild's network's perspective on what is needed to address child poverty across Europe. And on behalf of Eurochild, I would like to convey our heartfelt appreciation to the Prime Minister of Spain for finding the time in his busy schedule to address this webinar. The Prime Minister of Spain, His Excellency, Mr. Pedro Sánchez.
Estimada Directora General de Empleo y Asuntos Sociales de la Comisión Europea, Secretaria de Estado de Familias de la República Federal Alemana, Presidenta de Eurochild, Alto Comisionado para la Lucha contra la Pobreza Infantil, Director Regional de UNICEF, Presidente de la Plataforma de Infancia de España, me gustaría comenzar agradeciendo de corazón la oportunidad que se me da de inaugurar esta sesión clave en el marco de las jornadas sobre infancia y recuperación europea de Eurochild. Casi 1 de cada 4 niños en Europa sigue en riesgo de pobreza y en consecuencia de exclusión social. En Europa, que es probablemente el espacio de mayor prosperidad y cohesión social del mundo. Este dato a mí se me antoja absolutamente estremecedor y no podemos resignarnos a aceptarlo bajo ningún concepto, porque aceptarlo sería condenar nuestro futuro. El propio título de este seminario lanza un mensaje, a mi juicio, inequívoco. Abordar la pobreza infantil es un requisito previo para superar la crisis de forma sostenible. Poner, en consecuencia, la infancia en el centro mismo de nuestra recuperación es una obligación. Sin duda alguna es una obligación moral, pero también es una obligación política y una obligación económica. Porque lo es para crear sociedades justas, para crear sociedades democráticas, para crear sociedades libres, para crear sociedades también desde el punto de vista económico eficientes. Por todo ello debemos impulsar una garantía infantil que asegure el desarrollo y el bienestar de todos los niños y niñas de la Unión Europea. El Gobierno de España defiende con corazón, con pasión, esa estrategia, también con mucha firmeza, puesto que será de gran utilidad para complementar los esfuerzos nacionales que estamos desplegando desde los Estados miembros. En la última década los niveles de pobreza se han reducido considerablemente entre los mayores de 65 años, gracias, lógicamente, al buen funcionamiento de nuestro sistema público de pensiones. La franja de edad más baja es la de los menores de 18 años. Esa desigualdad lo que ha hecho ha sido crecer. En España el 27% de los menores de 18 años se encuentra en situación de riesgo de pobreza. El 27%. De ellos un 12% está en riesgo de pobreza severa. Y esto no son solamente cifras. Hablamos de proyectos de vida que se pueden quedar por el camino. Hablamos de más de 2 millones de niños y niñas que por situación económica están expuestos a mayores tasas de abandono escolar, de malnutrición, de exclusión social. Los niños, las niñas son los ciudadanos más vulnerables y no podemos dejarlos atrás. Por eso desde el Gobierno de España estamos desplegando una batería de medidas cuyo objetivo es romper el círculo de pobreza infantil. Lo primero que hicimos fue crear un alto comisionado, aquí presente, que reuniera a los expertos de alto nivel para guiar nuestras políticas públicas hacia dicho propósito, hacia dicho objetivo, tanto de forma específica como también de forma multidimensional. Me gustaría además poner algunos ejemplos. El primero de ellos es la aprobación en un tiempo récord de un ingreso mínimo vital, de una reforma estructural que reorganiza y que tiene además especialmente en cuenta la situación de la infancia, de las familias monoparentales, en su gran mayoría encabezadas por mujeres. Son más de 3.000 millones de euros anuales dirigidos a más de 800.000 hogares. El 50% de los beneficiarios son menores y el impacto de esta medida aspira a reducir en 2/3 la pobreza infantil severa. Junto con el ingreso mínimo vital, que es sin duda alguna la piedra angular de toda esta política de lucha contra la pobreza infantil, también hemos impulsado el programa Beca para luchar contra la brecha educativa que se produce en los meses de verano, en los meses estivales, cuando los más vulnerables se desvinculan de cualquier tarea formativa. Para ello hemos incrementado en un 59% su dotación en los presupuestos generales del Estado de 2021. Y junto a ello, un incremento histórico de un 70% en la inversión contra el abandono educativo temprano y el fracaso escolar, lo que se traduce, por ejemplo, en 78 millones de euros para el programa PROA de refuerzo y orientación académica. En cuarto lugar, me gustaría también subrayar que se van a destinar, dentro del marco del Plan de Recuperación, Transformación y Resiliencia de nuestra economía, más de 1.000 millones de euros a cerrar la brecha digital infantil y digitalizar a nuestro sistema educativo, incluyendo dispositivos para la infancia vulnerable con el Plan Educa en digital. En quinto lugar, una inyección de 80 millones de euros provenientes de los fondos europeos para mejorar el sistema de protección residencial y acogimiento familiar de niños, de niñas y de adolescentes. En sexto lugar, una inversión de 370 millones de euros para impulsar una de las asignaturas pendientes de nuestro país, que es la formación profesional, fundamental si queremos reducir las altas tasas de desempleo juvenil que sufre nuestro país. Y en séptimo lugar, partidas por valor de 200 millones de euros para extender la educación de 0 a 3 años, que es sin duda alguna una de las principales palancas para garantizar la igualdad de oportunidades. Y esto es solo el principio. No vamos a detenernos. La magnitud y la complejidad de la pobreza infantil en España y en Europa requiere del liderazgo de la Unión, pero también de los Estados miembros, de los gobiernos de cada uno de los Estados miembros. Requiere el compromiso político del más alto nivel, requiere coordinación, requiere también cogobernanza en un país como el nuestro, que tiene competencias desperdigadas por otras instituciones, y requiere visión estratégica, europea, respuestas concretas, nacionales, regionales y locales. Y requiere, ante todo, compromiso y financiación. No es vergonzante reconocer que hay pobreza infantil en nuestros países. Lo vergonzoso sería no tomar medidas ambiciosas al respecto. La crisis actual ha afectado de manera especial a la infancia y lo que decidamos ahora va a condicionar el futuro de las próximas generaciones. Por eso, la garantía infantil europea será fundamental para construir la Europa que viene y para cumplir también con los objetivos marcados en la Agenda 2030, los Objetivos de Desarrollo Sostenible. Una Europa verde, digital, cohesionada, igualitaria y que no deje a ningún niño, a ninguna niña atrás. Así que les deseo un fructífero debate. Muchísimas gracias.
I think there the Prime Minister has said it all very well and set out the terms of what we want to discuss today. As he mentioned, there are some shocking figures, but behind every one of those figures is a real life story. We also now have a welcoming remarks from Carles López Pico, who is president of the Spanish Child Rights Coalition, the Plataforma de Infancia in Spain. And he won't mind me saying that he was a 13-year-old. He created a student association at school, and a few years later, he was elected president of the Spanish National Student Confederation and has been the president now for since last September 2019. So let me hand over to you, Carlos, to get your thoughts on what you are hoping for from this morning's webinar.
Muy buenos días y muchas gracias a todos y a todas por vuestras palabras y por vuestra participación aquí. La verdad es que para la plataforma y para todas sus entidades es un auténtico placer organizar junto con Eurochild este webinar, este desayuno. Y es un placer por varios motivos. Primero de todo, es un placer porque trata un tema que es absolutamente prioritario en nuestra agenda, en la agenda de nuestro país, y es un tema de máxima actualidad en las políticas públicas de nuestro país. Segundo, es un placer porque es un un orgullo poder tener en este panel expertos de tan alto nivel que seguro que tendrán un debate muy fructífero y que podremos aprovechar y enriquecernos todos de él. Y tercero, es un placer poder contar con las palabras de Pedro Sánchez, presidente del gobierno de nuestro país, que indudablemente ha anunciado medidas que resultarán realmente positivas para la situación de la infancia de nuestro país. Medidas como la aprobación del ingreso mínimo vital, la lucha decidida contra el abandono escolar o una lucha también muy clara contra la pobreza infantil, en todas sus formas, son medidas que mejorarán directamente la vida de muchos niños y niñas. No obstante, tenemos que ser muy claros y muy conscientes de la situación de la que parte España en relación a la pobreza infantil. Antes de la crisis del COVID, ya 1 de cada 3 niños estaban en riesgo de pobreza o exclusión social en nuestro país. Es indudable comentar que la crisis del COVID ha provocado que esta situación se agrave en muchos niños y niñas. Que muchos niños y niñas vean privada su oportunidad y su derecho de asistir a sus centros educativos, de formarse, de participar, de asistir a sus parques o de muchas otras cosas en relación a su formación, a su ocio o a su alimentación, que ha agravado esta situación que ya veníamos arrastrando muy, muy perjudicial para la infancia. En esta situación somos muy conscientes que para revertir estas desigualdades y que para revertir este punto de partida, que como ya hemos comentado es muy desigual en relación a los países de nuestro entorno, necesitamos medidas aún más potentes, medidas muy decididas y medidas que pongan la lucha contra la pobreza infantil en el centro de las políticas públicas, en el centro del debate público, para que en la situación actual ningún niño ni niña se quede atrás. Y en este camino, en que ningún niño ni niña se quede atrás, desde la plataforma de infancia y desde todas sus entidades somos absolutamente conscientes de la importancia de la dimensión europea. Tanto la plataforma como todas nuestras entidades entendemos que es en el marco de la Unión donde se están debatiendo políticas públicas que tienen la oportunidad de cambiar directamente la vida de muchos niños y niñas. Y es por eso que entendemos central tanto el papel que juega Eurochild como todas sus entidades miembro en el marco de todos estos procesos que se están llevando a cabo en las instituciones europeas, que tienen que asegurar una apuesta fuerte por el que es uno de nuestros grandes retos de nuestros sistemas de bienestar: no dejar a ningún niño ni niña atrás en el marco de la pobreza infantil. Y para no dejar a ningún niño ni niña atrás, las instituciones europeas tienen que hacer apuestas valientes y decididas. Y un buen paso en el marco actual sería dedicar un mínimo del 5% del Fondo Social Europeo a esta lucha contra la pobreza infantil y de los recursos de los Estados miembros. Si me permitís terminar esta inauguración con una experiencia personal, yo hace muy poquitos años empecé a participar en una asociación de estudiantes de mi instituto y seguí participando. Y fue una organización de estudiantes la que me propuso como presidente de la plataforma de organizaciones de infancia. Y yo pude participar porque en ese momento tenía todas mis necesidades básicas cubiertas. No tenemos que dejar que ningún niño se quede atrás tampoco en el proceso de participación. Tenemos que asegurar que todos los niños y niñas en Europa tienen derecho a participar y tienen sus necesidades básicas cubiertas. Y por eso el trabajo de Eurochild y de todas sus entidades miembro es fundamental. Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, Carles, for those opening remarks. And I also want to say hello to Mariam and Angel. I see you have joined us. You will be on the panel later on. Now, I did promise you that we would be interactive this morning. So we are going to go to our first audience poll question. And it's going to be, which of these statements do you agree with? Starts off, child poverty and social inclusion is One, a big problem in my country and the EU should help my country to address it. Two, a big problem in my country but the EU is not able to help. Or three, not a big problem in my country. So you can vote. Please just click the button and select which one you would like to vote. Unfortunately, panelists, you can't vote, but I may ask you about it later on in our discussion. I hope everyone there will vote. We will give you a few minutes to do that. I'll repeat the question. Which of these statements do you most agree with? Child poverty and social exclusion is A, a big problem in my country and the EU should help my country to address it. B, a big problem in my country but the EU is not able to help. Or C, not a big problem in my country. Let's see if we have any results from that poll just as yet. No, I don't see any results just yet. Oh, there we go. Fantastic. So, very, very clear answer. Certainly no doubt there. Only 4% people said it's not a big problem. That says a lot. But also only 11% think that the EU is not able to help. A big problem in my country and the EU should help my country to address it. A huge 86% majority of you think that. Thank you very much for participating. We will bear that in mind going through our panel discussion, and there will be another poll a little bit later on. So with that, I am going to just introduce the panel discussion by introducing our first panelist, who is I will introduce all of them and then we will go through one by one their comments and their thoughts. So first panelist, Katarina Ivankovich, I can hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, Director of DG Employment and Social Affairs and Inclusion at the European Commission. We also have Petra Makroth, the Head of Directorate General Family Affairs at the Federal Ministry for Family Affairs, Senior Citizens, Women and Youth of Germany. Mariam and Angel, we will hear from a little bit later on, who are the representatives of the youth network of Plataforma de Infancia. We also have Afshan Khan, the UNICEF Regional Director for Europe and Central Asia, and the Special Coordinator for the Refuge and Migrant Response in Europe. And last but by no means least, Ernesto José Gasso Gonzalo, High Commissioner for the Fight Against Child Poverty in Spain. Thank you all, ladies and gentlemen, very much for joining us. We are looking forward to your thoughts. But first off, I'm going to start with, as I said, Katarina. We're aware that the European Commission is going to present the Child Guarantee Council recommendation in early 2021. So we are looking forward to seeing that. But can you tell us more about the Child Guarantee, how in particular it will shift the mindsets to address child poverty through structural reforms?
Good morning, Jennifer, and good morning to all. And how much I wish we would be somewhere in Brussels or anywhere, or in Spain, in beautiful Spain, and have a lovely coffee and croissant this morning, or whichever other pastry we could have. And it would be really, really a pleasure. But the fact that we are here, all of us remotely working in our homes or in our working environments, distanced from each other, shows a lot, and this is our reality. And I will reflect a bit how it affected children. And I think the COVID is, as we very often say, that 2013 recommendation on investing in children is a major milestone when it comes to the development of the children's policy all around Europe. I think this COVID crisis is also such a hard and important, unfortunately important milestone that will put the frame to our future policies. And as your previous speakers mentioned it is indeed something that will be also addressed in the European Child Guarantee. So we all know about the I would say several times, and we have now we are at the first phase, which was the feasibility feasibility study for the child. Thanks to that study, for which Europart was as well a member of the consortium that worked on the feasibility study, we have analyzed several groups of children, and we have analyzed access to several different services. Out of this phase comes the second phase, which is ongoing, which will provide a detailed economic analysis of the design, feasibility, governance, and different implementation options. The second phase is now, I would say, in its final run, and it will last until the first quarter next year, which will be exactly about the time that we will present our European Child Guarantee. And the third phase, and I'm very happy to see representatives of the UNICEF with us today, started this summer. We just last week had a very excellent kickoff, and I'm sure that my colleague from UNICEF can speak about it a bit more. Extremely successful with 7 member states, in which projects are going to be implemented, concrete projects are going to be implemented, but also with this phase of the Child Guarantee, we wanted to pilot and we wanted to have some innovative approaches that will not necessarily, of course, feed in the European Guarantee. It might help in the future, because what we consider extremely important is to develop a good and solid monitoring system, so that we know how to address children, which children, and how to put the perspective of the Child Guarantee into concrete measures. As the president of Eurochild has said, and thank you very much, Maria Luisa, your support has always been extremely welcomed and visible, and you really are, as a person and as a president of the Eurochild, devoted to addressing needs of the children all around Europe. So my huge appreciation for all that you and the Eurochild are doing. You mentioned that it is high political priority. And yes, indeed, it was announced in the 2019 political guidelines by the President von der Leyen. It is her personal mission, I would dare to say. It has been included in our work program for 2021, and it will be delivered. And we all know that it's going to be the Council recommendation on the European Child Guarantee. I want to reflect briefly on the COVID, and it is my strong belief that the COVID lockdown hit all the children very hard, and all the children are, I would dare to say, suffering from the COVID lockdown, not only when it comes to their education, but also when it comes to their social contacts, when it comes to their usual life and growing up. I also would dare to say that lockdown hit disadvantaged children very hard, and hardest than the other children, of course. And the lockdown of schools and shift to the distance learning revealed inequalities and major problems, such as, just to mention some, the lack of the ICT equipment, the lack of internet access, the lack of, for example, school meals that were put in place, especially for deprived children or children living in poverty. And we have seen that in the past with European Fund for Aid, the FEAD, we have been able to address hungry children, and we have been able to address the way how the schools or some other organizations or institutions provide schools to children, and this was stopped. Also, we have seen that low-income families have been particularly affected, and I can promise you that we will try our best to address this also in the European Child Guarantee. Not only because it is immediate reaction to the COVID crisis, but also because the digital and the distance learning and the different forms of new learning and new work are the new reality. And this is not something that will go away. To come back to the initiative, I'm sure that you're all awaiting what am I going to say and who are the children that will be affected by the child guarantee. We appreciate very much, I would say, all of the members of the parliament who supported 5% and who I hope are going to really in the end persuade that it needs to be included in the future MFF and the financial framework for next 7 years. We know that 5% of the ESF Plus, European Social Fund Plus, will not resolve the children's poverty. And this is something that I think is extremely important to mention on every occasion. We want the EU action and we want EU funding to trigger national actions and to trigger national spendings and national fundings. This might require also distribution of the national budgets or local budgets. We know that local and regional community play an important role as services that are relevant for children, such as early childcare and education or healthcare or social services in a more narrow sense, or the housing challenges. They're all there at the local communities. We also want to secure that the member states implement and prepare the national plans. By the national plans, they're going to tell us how they plan to address the child guarantee and how they plan to address it in their everyday actions. Who are the children in need? I think this is a question that we are all waiting to see. We will wait a bit longer. Of course, I would be happy to share with you all the possible options that we are discussing and that are on the table now. But I can say that I thank you all for helping us to identify the children in need. We will take on board the point that the European Child Guarantee is a tool to fight poverty, is a tool to fight inequalities. In order to fight the poverty, we will have strong support, and we are taking the lessons learned from the implementation of the European Pillar of Social Rights. And indeed, the child guarantee we see as one of the most important elements to address poverty in Europe. So with this, we are also not going to forget the specific groups and the specific groups of children that have been analyzed in the first phase of the feasibility study. Either children living in precarious households, or children with a migrant background, or children with disabilities. And for the children with disabilities, I think you will see a bit of hint already at the beginning of next year in our new European strategy on the rights of the persons with disabilities, and also children residing in institutions and homeless children. So all these groups of children are going to find our way in our future Council recommendation. The main point is that in order to make our guarantee reality, we all have to put the funding in. So beside the ESF Plus and beside your funding, as mentioned, we also want to dig the possibilities, and we also want the member states to think about the new mechanisms, the Next Generation EU, the Recovery and Resilience Fund, that they might think about supporting actions relevant for children. We know, and we are very much aware, that it is up to the member states to decide what they want to put in their national reform and resilience programs. But I'm using this opportunity also to advocate to all of you to push in your member states that the actions relevant for children find their place there as well. So by this, Jennifer, I would close, and I'm looking forward for our future discussion.
Thank you very much, Katarina. And a reminder to everyone that, of course, you can hear simultaneous translation by clicking on the globe at the bottom of your screen and selecting your preferred language. We also encourage you to send in questions, including to Katarina, using the Q&A function, and we will discuss those a little bit later on in our panel debate. With that, I'm going to move on to our next speaker. We have Petra Makov, who is Head of Directorate General Family Affairs at the Federal Ministry for Family Affairs, Senior Citizens, Women and Youth of Germany. So thank you very much, Petra, for joining us. Is this crisis an opportunity to think about how we can do better? The last 5 months, 6 months of the German presidency, of course, of the EU have been quite a roller coaster. So what sort of things for children's issues do you think should be prioritised by governments during the pandemic response and recovery?
So thank you very much. But for the first, I want to tell you that I'm very pleased, and I thank you for giving me the opportunity to attend this webinar. And I have to say that putting children at the heart of Europe's recovery is a brilliant headline for your breakfast seminars to mark World Children's Day 2020. I think it's tomorrow. My colleagues said we have it tomorrow. With regard to the title of the webinar today, I fully agree with you that tackling child poverty is a prerequisite to sustainably exit the crisis. And I strongly believe that crisis is an opportunity to rethink how we can do better and how we have to react on current and future challenges. The COVID-19 pandemic has shown from the very beginning that families are the central pillar of our society. Many people have supported each other during the time, especially within the family. For a large number of families, however, this time had and still has a strong economic and psychological impact. For children, the closure of educational and care facilities meant the loss of contact with friends and peers. The switching to homeschooling caused great challenges in learning for both the children and the parents. For some of the parents, the period also presented major problems with regard to balancing work and family life. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic, many families had to cope with fewer financial resources despite the emergency financial measures implemented at short notice in most European countries. We did so in Germany too, and I'm going to tell you if you want to know at the end or later. Some parents had been paid short-time allowances, others lost their jobs. The uncertainty about their own professional future is an additional burden for many parents, especially families that were already in difficult situations before the outbreak of the pandemic, fear the consequences of the pandemic and the loss of supportive structure even harder. This applies particularly to families with low income, single parents, families with many children, families with a migration background, and families with children, with disabled children. There is a risk that social inequalities, especially in education, will be further increased by the COVID-19 pandemic. Initial studies indicate that social inequalities have increased due to differences in access to digital technology and the lack of support for learning at home. Another development to be observed is the relationship between the violence against children or women, and contact restrictions and as isolations at home. The different political measures to reduce the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on families with children in Europe show that EU member states are responding with different approaches to the same challenges. This is obviously partly to the different starting points of countries in COVID-19 times, especially in the area of family policy and digital affairs. The Federal Ministry for Family Affairs, Senior Citizens, Women and Youth, within the framework of the German presidency of the Council of the EU, is focusing, for example, on supporting families during the pandemic with the international online conference on the 24th of November. It's next week, 2020, Overcoming COVID-19 Jointly Develop Strong Families. Current challenges during the COVID-19 pandemic and the possible solutions will be discussed by representatives of the European Commission and the EU member states, as well as experts from politics, science, and civil society. The aim is to jointly develop prospects for strong families. For Germany, I can say we faced the challenge of COVID-19 pandemic, and we answered with 3 or 4 strategies. For the first, there was we had to remark that there was that many people had a financial problem. So we assistance for families with children or relatives in need of care. For example, working parents who cannot go to work because of childcare responsibilities receive compensation for loss or earnings for up to 20 weeks under the Protection Against Infect Act. And single parents, they have 20 weeks too. Families with a low income have easier access to child supplement. This is a supplement to the child allowance. Thanks to legislative changes, the parents are not disadvantaged in receiving parental allowance. Maybe, for example, because before the birth, they are in the short income period. In addition, families are being supported by an extension of the number of days they can receive child sickness benefit, and by the one-off child bonus payment of 300 euros per child. And we also care for people who are looking for their old people in the family, and the care support allowance or carers grant you can take in Germany up to 20 days. We did some things, and I think it was all right for the parents which have financial problems. And what we saw was the companies, they accompanied the parents, and they talked with them about their working hours and when they could come, and so that they could stay in their work. And that's the most important thing you can do. You can make sure that parents in this period stay at their employment, and make sure that the jobs still last. So for the first, and I'm looking forward to the discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We hope we will have questions for you. A reminder to our audience, use the Q&A function below. With that, we will move on to Mariam and Angel, who are 2 15-year-olds who represent the Colectivo de Acción para el Juego y la Educación, I hope I pronounced that okay, a non-profit organization, and they're both part of a group of teenagers from this organization. And last weekend, the whole group spent the weekend working on their recommendations for our session today. Mariam and Angel, it's lovely to see you both again. Over to you. Give us your thoughts from you and your group.
Thanks. Hello, my name is Angel, and I'm going to talk about things that concern us about young poverty and our proposals to prevent it.
Hello, my name is Mariam, and as my partner, I'm going to talk about things that alarm us as about the many young people that is at risk of poverty.
Last Friday, all of our group contributed with ideas and possible solutions. At first, we talked about things that show us that we could be in a risk of poverty. The problems that we talked about last Friday in CAGE were: first, struggle to make ends meet. Also, children do not have good or enough food, not affording clothes or school supplies. One or both parents are employed. Teenagers leave their studies earlier to work and help their families. Many people do not have access to security measures, which means that they are unprotected and more likely to suffer from COVID. Not being able to go on a holiday. These are some of the points that have increased with the arrival of the COVID. Lack of equal access to electronic devices and the internet. Lack of basic health services and lack of basic living conditions.
After that, we talk about possible solutions, like, for example, resuming scholarships as they were interrupted due to the pandemic, giving computers or tablets to people in need to help with the online classes, and also increase the food aid because there are ridiculous laws, lower the price of masks, or give them free to families who cannot access to their purchase. In my point of view, that will help a lot. More organizations to help and distribute food to vulnerable families, and increase the aid per dependent child, because here in Spain is lower than the rest of Europe, because it's 28.41 euros per month. But if we ensure a minimum and decent working and social conditions for our families, none of this will be necessary.
After exposing this such situation, what real solutions are given by the institution that should believe in us? Support us in our development as people, besides protecting and taking care of us.
Here we are.
Count on us.
Thank you very much. That was a great input, and I really like your practical solutions. I feel that's very, very helpful for today's discussion. I hope we will have some questions for you a little bit later on. Thank you again, Mariam and Angel, and all of your group for your hard work. I want to turn now to Afshan Khan from UNICEF. Afshan, how has UNICEF been urging EU countries to step up their efforts in terms of combating child poverty, but also to mitigate the ongoing impacts of COVID-19 that Mariam and Angel so articulately identified there?
Thank you, Jennifer, for this opportunity to speak on the panel. And I'd also like to thank Her Excellency Marie-Louise Colera Presa and from Eurochild's president, as well as Carlos Lopez Pica, from the president of the Platform in Infancia, for their great introductions. I just wanted to say what a pleasure also it is to be with the panel group here, because when we talk about implementing solutions, I think both Katarina Ivankovich, Knesevich spoke very eloquently about DG employment and the European Commission's role. Petra Makorth on what is being done in Germany, alongside Julian Seffert, the State Secretary for Ministry and Family Affairs. And obviously Spain is one of the countries, given the Prime Minister's eloquent strategy, that we're very much looking to collaborate with in terms of looking at measures for phase 3 of the implementation of the piloting of the child guarantee. So for me, I see today as an opportunity as an honor, actually, to be part of this panel and group of panelists, but also a bit of a tragedy that we're speaking about child poverty and social exclusion in Europe, the world's wealthiest continent. And as we face a second wave of COVID-19, the challenge of fighting child poverty and social exclusion becomes even more daunting. So even in high-income countries, I think we're facing some very, very real challenges. And those were so eloquently spoken to by Miriam and Angel from the collective CAE. So I want to go back a bit to some of the statistics, because the fact that even across Europe, we have at least 350,000 children living in institutional care that are deprived of a safe family environment or community-based care, and this may grow in the years to come, means that we have a very real challenge in dealing specifically with those groups of institutionalized children. And the risks, if families are not supported adequately, is that those numbers will increase. So clearly that has to be a group and family support mechanisms for those vulnerable children as a clear priority. I think the second piece that we've learned is that schools and closures have led to learning losses, particularly in households without access to computers or without access to the internet. So that's another critical group to deal with in terms of addressing the digital divide. I think we also have to recognize that the peer relationships and the connectedness that are so critical to child well-being are harder to maintain, placing children and young people at greater risk of mental health impacts. So that's another outcome of COVID, that as we look towards what are the key elements for protecting children during this period, it's another critical one. And as many speakers have said, UNICEF is deeply concerned about the impact of the crisis on children and youth and what this means for increased inequalities. This is one of the reasons we're proud to be partnering with the European Commission and representatives of 7 EU member states, including our host Spain, to implement the third pilot phase of the EU Child Guarantee. And we welcome the Spanish government's commitment as a key champion of the Child Guarantee in Europe and a leader in our collective efforts to address this challenge. So the Child Guarantee's focus on reducing poverty, on really speaking and building on some of the data that was collected already, is going to be critical to define collective action moving forward. And we're also clear that in many ways, we see that the child poverty agenda requires some very specific interventions on our part as UNICEF. We've looked at specific measures around investing in early childhood. We've looked at measures around investments in case management for children and young people, looking at specific groups, early childhood care for support of refugee and migrant children in Greece, and in Bulgaria, some strong work around early childhood development. Working with children with disabilities, others have mentioned as a key area of investment. And then I would think partly, and this was very well addressed by my colleague from DG Employment, setting in place some of the mechanisms for monitoring is going to be very, very critical as we move forward. So these are investments that are really, really critical to addressing longer term structural impediments. And lastly, I would say a clear focus on youth and skill building for youth, because poverty, social inclusion, and the EU's plan to ensure an economic recovery for all are key building blocks to make sure that the Child Guarantee is implemented in all 7 member states we're working with. But most importantly, I also think the political spectrum of working with key partners at the national, at the municipal levels to make sure that investments are made at the national level will be pivotal. And lastly, I would say for UNICEF, we are very much seeking to this pilot to also be a way in which we are able to better monitor impact of some of the changes that are being made. So in our discussion and in our launch that we had last week with the Commissioner, Schmidt, we've very clearly committed with member states to develop some clear metrics and monitoring so we're able to measure the changes, have some clear sets of indicators, and also very closely look at the whole budget scenario. So I think this whole element of looking also at the Recovery and Resilience Fund that's being implemented in Europe will be pivotal to addressing skills training and opportunities for youth, as well as breaking the digital divide. So let me stop there, hand back to you, Jennifer, and thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you very much, Afshan. I'm going to turn now to Ernesto Jose Gonzalo, High Commissioner for the Fight Against Child Poverty in Spain. Ernesto, how does your office help to prioritize and coordinate national policies? Have we got Ernesto? I cannot see you, Ernesto, if you're there. Perhaps you could switch on your camera. Because what I want to know about is how are national strategies for preventing and tackling child poverty so important? Thank you.
Good morning. Muy buenos días a todas y a todos. Agradecer a Eurochild y a su presidenta y también a la plataforma de infancia, Carles, la invitación a poder participar en este foro, en este encuentro que puede ser crucial para la infancia en Europa y para construir una Europa mejor. Creemos que realmente iniciativas como las que están en proceso y que deben ser combinadas, como la Garantía Infantil Europea, el Plan de Acción para la implantación del Pilar Europeo de los Derechos Sociales o la Estrategia de la Unión Europea sobre los derechos de la infancia, son elementos claves para garantizar una igualdad de oportunidades con los más vulnerables, que son las niñas y los niños del conjunto de Europa. El propio presidente del Gobierno español, en el vídeo que hemos podido escuchar a primera hora de la mañana, Sánchez, junto con el comisionado de escuchar hoy un compromiso firme con todas estas iniciativas, una respuesta coordinada para combatir la pobreza también en Europa, aunque seamos la zona con mayor desarrollo económico y social. Como han dicho todas mis predecesoras en este foro, en una coyuntura
Unfortunately, we seem to have lost the sound there. The technical issues are always plaguing these online events, so that is very unfortunate. However, I hope we were able to hear at least some of the speech there, as we've lost, unfortunately, our connection with Ernesto Jose Gonzalo, but we appreciate his efforts to join us. For now, I would like to ask the other panelists to switch back on their videos and microphones, and we'll enter into a little bit of Q&A. I see many of you are sending questions through the function. We are tight on time today, so we probably won't be able to get to all of them, but rest assured they will be forwarded after the event so that we will get all the questions that you send us in over the 3 days answered as much as possible. Let's go to question one. We received a question from a teenager from Scotland who was wondering how his country can end child poverty without the help of the EU. I suppose he's referring to Brexit there, unfortunately. Katarina, I'm going to propose that to you, please.
Thank you very much, Jennifer, and thank you very much to you who have asked the question.
Hello.
Yes.
Good morning. Good morning. Hello. Hemos vuelto.
Ernesto, I think
Nos podemos escuchar,
okay.
nos escuchamos a ver.
I will reply later.
Vale, perfecto, os escuchamos. Os pido
Ernesto, are you ready to continue or would you like to wait until... Okay, we'll let you continue now then. Thank you very much for your efforts.
Disculpa, no sabemos muy bien qué ha pasado, pero bueno, nos volvemos a conectar. Continúo. Como decía, la propia crisis del COVID-19 ha acentuado todavía más y ha profundizado en estas diferencias. Desde este alto comisionado, que nació en el año 2018 por propio compromiso del presidente del Gobierno español, Pedro Sánchez, ante una situación de gravedad, como se ha expuesto, España tiene una situación extrema de pobreza infantil y que durante décadas no ha estado entre las prioridades de las acciones de nuestros gobiernos, consideró que era necesario trabajar y avanzar en luchar contra esta lacra, contra esta desigualdad y favorecer la igualdad de oportunidades en nuestro país, especialmente entre la población más vulnerable, que son las niñas y los niños. Los ejes en los que hemos trabajado, lo primero fue hacer un diagnóstico certero, saber de qué estábamos hablando, cuál era la fotografía real de la situación de la pobreza infantil en nuestro territorio, y para ello se trabajó y se ha constituido un mapa a nivel comarcal y local de cuál es la situación en el conjunto de nuestro país. El segundo eje de trabajo ha sido la colaboración interinstitucional con los distintos ministerios, con las distintas administraciones en un país muy descentralizado como es España y, como decía el propio presidente, con competencias muy repartidas entre los distintos niveles de la administración, y para ello se aprobó y se impulsó junto con otros ministerios del propio Gobierno de España la Estrategia Nacional de Prevención y Lucha contra la Pobreza y la Exclusión Social en el marco 2019-2023, con una perspectiva de infancia muy patente por primera vez en la historia de nuestro país. Esta estrategia es especialmente importante porque asegura el cumplimiento de una de las condiciones habilitantes para la recepción de fondos europeos y es muy útil para la futura garantía infantil europea, que desde España y desde este alto comisionado consideramos crucial en la colaboración Europa y los Estados para hacer una Europa del siglo XXI mucho más justa y mucho más adecuada a los valores de la propia Unión y principios de la propia Unión. La estrategia marca las líneas prioritarias de actuación en la lucha contra la pobreza y fija a esta pobreza infantil como una prioridad. Algunas de las medidas que se propusieron ya hemos empezado a materializarlas, como también ha señalado el presidente de nuestro gobierno. Por ejemplo, hemos logrado ya actualizar el indicador de referencia para prestaciones de ayudas, asegurando su intensidad protectora, una medida que ya se ha incluido en los presupuestos generales del Estado para el año 2021. Otra medida que también se contempló es el avance en el desarrollo de un sistema estatal de rentas mínimas también ya implementada, el ingreso mínimo vital, y que atiende de manera especial a los hogares de niños y niñas a cargo y sobre todo a la pobreza más severa. Otro de los objetivos de este eje, que también estamos trabajando e incrementando, es mejorar el acceso a los servicios básicos de los niños y las niñas en situación de pobreza, especialmente en educación, donde nos hemos centrado en la expansión de la etapa preescolar, priorizando a la infancia más vulnerable. También en combatir la marcada desigualdad en la tasa de repetición de abandono educativo, que en nuestro país tiene unos porcentajes más altos que la media de la Unión Europea, y en promover la implantación de programas de refuerzo fundamentales, tanto en el apoyo y orientación educativa, que permitan mejorar estos resultados y permitir a aquellos que tengan mayor dificultad tener esa igualdad de oportunidades en el futuro mercado laboral. La pandemia, como han señalado algunas de las predecesoras a mis palabras, ha puesto de manifiesto también la existencia en nuestro país de una profunda brecha social digital, que desde el alto comisionado hemos identificado y cuantificado durante los meses de la primera ola de la pandemia. En base a ello, estamos emprendiendo acciones concretas junto con otros ministerios, como se señalaba, para mejorar el acceso a Internet y a los dispositivos. Y para ello el propio Gobierno español ha hecho un compromiso presupuestario significativo para que la educación digital se extienda al conjunto del país y llegue a todos los hogares y a todos los niños y niñas que lo necesitan en España. Otro ámbito central de nuestro trabajo en este eje es la incidencia en el ámbito europeo, en el cual hoy participamos gustosamente. Es un momento muy importante de reconstrucción para España y para Europa. Y este alto comisionado está trabajando para dotar de una perspectiva de infancia a la implantación en España de los fondos del mecanismo de recuperación y resiliencia que han sido aprobados recientemente. También apostamos por la recomendación de inversión en infancia del Fondo Social Europeo y coordinamos desde este alto comisionado la tercera fase de la acción preparatoria para la garantía infantil europea en lo correspondiente al Estado español. Y proponemos mejoras en la implantación de otros fondos europeos, como por ejemplo podría ser el FEAT. Desde este alto comisionado pensamos, por tanto, que la pobreza infantil es una cuestión de Estado, y así lo hemos hecho, y que requiere el compromiso del conjunto de la sociedad, de las administraciones, pero también del conjunto de la ciudadanía. Por eso el tercer eje tiene un elemento central para nosotros, es la creación de una alianza de país a nivel de toda España, donde la pobreza infantil cero sea el objetivo que coordine todos los esfuerzos y todos los recursos de las administraciones públicas, del tercer sector, de los agentes económicos y sociales, así como el conjunto de la sociedad civil. Somos conscientes de que nos queda mucho camino por recorrer en la protección a la infancia más vulnerable, pero estamos avanzando y queremos avanzar con pasos seguros. Y en ese sentido, desde el año 2018, que se constituyó este alto comisionado, entendemos que se está produciendo el cambio de paradigma y que la infancia en pobreza por primera vez en nuestra historia es un asunto prioritario en la agenda del Gobierno y queremos que sea en el conjunto del país, como he señalado anteriormente. Como ha dicho el propio presidente Pedro Sánchez en su intervención, no nos vamos a detener. La única manera de salir de esta crisis de forma sostenible y segura es invertir en nuestro futuro como sociedad. Y ese futuro es trabajar por una infancia donde las niñas y los niños tengan igualdad de oportunidades y sean el mejor de nuestros futuros. Muchas gracias a todos por permitirme participar en un foro tan interesante.
Thank you, Ernesto, and thank you for persevering. We're very pleased that you were able to connect again. Now, as time is running very short, I'm just going to give one question to each of our panelists, but as I say, we will answer your questions remotely afterwards. Katarina, that question that I had put to you from our teenager in Scotland who's worried that there won't be EU support to help children post-Brexit.
Well, thank you very much, and I will also use this opportunity to send my final message. And I think our previous speaker, the commissioner from Spain, has struck really and could answer the question to the Scottish teenager. The point is, if there is a political will, then there is a way. And I think we see it very clearly. We see it clearly because if you prioritize children, if you prioritize to address equal opportunities of children, then you will find a way. You will find it either in EU funding and EU programs or in the national context. And I'm so happy that our Spanish colleagues are proposing to address children in the RRF. I'm so happy that they are planning to address the need for nutrition and healthy nutrition of children through the FEAD. And this is the core. This is the core of EU policies, and this is why we do everything that we do here in Brussels in order that you can implement it in the member states. Unfortunately, Scotland, for you, it's a bit a different situation, and I say it with a great pity and a great regret, because I have been following the Scottish implementation of the funds as it is a part of my directorate as well. And you did some really great things in the area of social inclusion. And I hope that you will continue it in the future. Besides having the strong political will, you need to have a solid strategy, solid strategic base, and you need to have the solid action plans, how to implement and how to put it into reality. And then last, but maybe the most important, you need to allocate sufficient resources. And I hope that our listeners all around Europe are really very much aware of all of these important aspects, which look very simple, but we see that now, as Afshan said, it is 2020 and we are speaking about children's poverty. This is indeed something that we should go beyond, and we should find a solution for children living in the poverty. Thank you.
Thank you, Katarina. Much appreciated keeping your remarks concise and to the point. Afshan, I have a question for you, which is, how do we support children in vulnerable situations in vulnerable member states?
Thank you, Jennifer, for that question. I think first and foremost, I'd really like to congratulate the government of Spain in particular for laying out such a comprehensive framework. And I think that partnership will also be pivotal for us to see during phase 3 of the pilot, how best we implement some of these strategies. And I'd like to also come back to Miriam and Angel's points that having young people participate as part of that discussion will be extremely important. So over the next 4 months, particularly for Spain, we're looking to work very closely with an alliance of partners, UNICEF, the UNICEF National Committee in Spain, government and other key stakeholders to do a deep dive of what are some of the key elements for reducing child poverty and social exclusion. I think given the extensive groundwork that's already been done, understand the scope and impacts of efforts to address child poverty and social exclusion at the subnational level is going to be key, and focusing on those zones that need additional assistance in the autonomous states, identifying some of the key data sources and indicators to monitor child poverty, and identifying some of the formal and informal barriers that exclude children, particularly from the 4 target groups of the Child Guarantee. So that's children from migrant background with disabilities, those in institutional care, and those living in precarious situations. And those barriers to accessing social services and understanding what those are is pivotal, because I think the research by the government of Spain has shown that even when services are free of charge, children from poor and socially excluded populations are not fully accessing them. So those are 4 pivotal elements for Spain. I think when we look at each of the countries, we have to adapt our mechanisms based on the research of where the most vulnerable groups are to then see how do we address those effectively. And I think the types of alliances that have been formed with NGOs, with civil society, with government are going to be pivotal to address this in a holistic way. And finally, young people themselves participating and engaging and offering what they've learned from trying to address services alongside their families are a pivotal learning point for us. So let me stop there and turn back to you in the interest of time, Jennifer.
Thank you very much. Well, you said we wanted to get young people involved. So our next question is to Mariam and Angel. Mariam and Angel, I hope you can hear me. You mentioned the need to ensure a minimum and decent working and social conditions for our families as a fundamental step to supporting children. Do you have any proposals that governments could do better to improve children's living conditions? What are the main things that you think are important?
Hemos estado hablando con el grupo de CAGE y hemos llegado a ciertas conclusiones. Para empezar, creemos que deberían implicarse más en este tema. Estos espacios están muy bien para recoger las opiniones de algunos de nosotros, pero es que luego hay que llevarlas a la práctica. Y deberían dejar de pelear entre ellos solo para ganar más votos cuando sean las elecciones y que comiencen a actuar.
Os invitamos a venir a ver lo que pasa de primera mano en vez de mandar a otros. No solo aparentar, sino analizar las situaciones y buscar soluciones que, aunque no terminen del todo con las desigualdades, porque eso es casi imposible, pero sí que lo disminuyan y poco a poco mejorar las condiciones de los niños, niñas y jóvenes. Gracias.
Gracias por escucharnos.
Thank you very much. Thank you for giving us your thoughts. We much appreciate it. Finally, I would like Petra, we have one quick question asking, what are some of the success factors in public administration to effectively tackle child poverty? If Petra hears me, maybe we could switch on the camera.
Maybe, can you see me? I hope you can see me. So I think the most important thing is, let me start first, that we are going with you what the aims of the Child Guarantee Initiative in the EU Commission belongs. Access to free health care, free education, free early childhood education and care, decent housing and adequate nutrition is essential for children at risk of poverty and social exclusion. But I think one important thing is to have free education and free early childhood education and care, because, and this is one thing we want to discuss during our presidency of the Council, because the one very important thing is that is the support of parents' participation in or their re-entry into the labor market. By facilitating access for all to affordable early childhood education and care for good quality, as well as flexible working arrangement. And this is very urgent for the children too, because one of the prerequisites to exit poverty in their later lives. So let me tell you that we are going to start a joint declaration with the trio of Portugal, Slovenia and Germany, where we aiming at mitigating the impact of COVID-19 pandemic. But this is also very important if you look forward to mitigate the poverty of children. And I would be very glad if you follow us on this way, because we think a very important thing is to get in dialogue and to work together and to give each other good examples for what is working in the country. So I think we are on the way, and I will tell a very big thank you to the EU Commission to start this process of tackling child poverty. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And indeed, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, to all our panelists. Our final question today is going to you, the audience. So get your fingers ready for our final poll question. What is your greatest expectation from the European Child Guarantee Initiative? You've got several options there. It will ensure reduction of child poverty is prioritised in the COVID recovery. It will encourage our political leaders to set concrete targets for reducing child poverty in my country. It will encourage our political leaders to set concrete targets for reducing child poverty in my country. It will ensure EU funds are spent more strategically to tackle child poverty. or it will generate more public debate on the issue of child poverty. So what is your greatest expectation from the European Child Guarantee Initiative? You've heard a little bit about it today, but we want to know what your expectations are when we finally see it. I'm sure many on the Commission are watching this with interest. So I'll read quickly through the options again, and then we will see the results. It will ensure reduction of child poverty is prioritised in the COVID recovery. It will encourage our political leaders to set concrete targets for reducing child poverty in my country. I think that's the same one again. It will encourage our political leaders to set targets for reducing child poverty in my country. It will ensure EU funds are spent more strategically to tackle child poverty, and it will generate more public debate on the issue of child poverty. Let's see there what the results are, if we have them. I think it has come up. Yes, indeed. So adding together the two that are the same, we can see that they're probably about the same. It will encourage our political leaders to set concrete targets for reducing child poverty in my country. It's about 39%, but also on 39%, it will encourage EU funds are spent more strategically to tackle child poverty. Well, we do indeed hope that is the case. So you may think that that is the end, but I am actually going to hand over now to Jana Hainsworth, Eurochild Secretary General, to say our farewells, along with Ricardo Ibarra, Director of Plataforma de Infancia, host of today's event. I apologize for running a little bit over time, so over to you, Jana.
Thank you very much, Jennifer, and apologies, we are running a little over time, but I just wanted to close this event with a huge appreciation of all the contributions from the panelists. I think it was a very, very rich input that we have today. And just to respond to that last panel question from Eurochild's perspective, all of those areas are critically important for us. We know child poverty is a big problem and it needs first and foremost to be resolved at local, regional, national level. But I think, as you've heard today, the European Union has an incredibly important role. So we thank very much the European Commission and Katarina for being with us. And we do hope that we will mobilize all our effort to get those government commitments to earmark resources through the Child Guarantee. Thank you particularly to our German colleagues and the German presidency for leading the way. We look forward to the next trio with Portugal and Slovenia down the line. UNICEF, incredibly important partner, and I think this phase 3 of modeling the Child Guarantee in countries is going to be an extremely important exercise to hopefully, as was said in the poll, make sure resources are spent in the most strategic way possible. So I think we cannot underestimate the importance of having the video address from Pedro Sanchez today and showing that leadership, and the inputs from Ernesto Gasco, very much appreciated. So just to say, it's really important that we work in collaboration, and Plataforma de Infancia is a very, very important partner of ours. We need to hear all of the voices, and I think Mariam and Angel, today you have really shown how children's participation can be done in such a meaningful and concise and helpful way. Thank you to you, but also thank you to all of the children that have been contributing and working behind the scenes to bring your message to us today. So this period of webinars is really an opportunity for us to prioritize investment in children, put children at the heart of the recovery, make a quick mention as well of our report that we're launching these days, which is showing how children have fared during the COVID crisis, but also giving our recommendations for the future. So please do take the opportunity to look at our report on children in the lockdown, growing up in the COVID period. So finally, pass the floor to Ricardo. You've been wonderful partners during this preparation, and I really hope that we can continue this momentum and make a difference together. Thank you, and thank you, Jennifer, for the moderation.
Thank you very much, Jana. Even if it's an European event, we'll continue in Spanish because we have a really big audience today. So I will use my opportunity to speak in Spanish for the first time, I think, in an Eurochild event. Muchísimas gracias, la verdad que ha sido un placer poder colaborar con Eurochild, poder tener la posibilidad de participar en este evento y creo que ha sido un evento muy, muy interesante, ¿no? Para poner la pobreza infantil en el centro de la agenda pública, en el centro de las políticas en las que creemos que hay que trabajar. Creo que escuchar, por un lado, las opiniones desde la Comisión Europea, desde las instituciones, de cómo se va a trabajar, qué oportunidades se abren con esos proyectos pilotos, ese trabajo a través de la garantía infantil o cómo con los fondos europeos que se están habilitando, ya sea el presupuesto multianual o directamente el programa Next Generation, vamos a poder abordar directamente la pobreza infantil si hay voluntad política y si hay una apuesta decidida para cambiar estas situaciones, ¿no? Y también el rol fundamental que tienen también los Estados miembros. Yo creo que es clave que todas las administraciones tengan en cuenta la necesidad de abordar este problema. Y además necesitamos abordarlo no de una manera puntual, no simplemente paliando algunos problemas que hay que abordarlo, sobre todo por la COVID, sino también con cambios estructurales. Y eso implica un cambio sistémico que haga modificaciones sustanciales en toda la realidad de nuestro país, en las políticas públicas y los presupuestos, para que la infancia realmente sea objeto de esos estados del bienestar adecuadamente, que muchas veces esa infancia vulnerable queda fuera. Pero no solamente es una tarea gubernamental, también el resto de la sociedad tiene un papel, desde las empresas hasta, por supuesto, la sociedad, a la hora de escuchar a los niños y las niñas y tener en cuenta a los niños como lo que son, sujetos de derechos y no objetos de protección, que para eso mañana celebramos la Convención de Derechos del Niño y ese Día Internacional tan importante para que reflexionemos un poco cómo ponemos a los niños y las niñas realmente en el centro de nuestras actuaciones. Y, por supuesto, un cambio fundamental sistémico tiene que ser la voz de los propios niños y niñas. Los niños y niñas, como hoy Mariam y Ángel nos han trasladado, tienen mucho que aportar desde su propia realidad, desde la realidad que ellos conocen más directamente y en este problema como es la pobreza infantil, pero en cualquier otro. Yo me voy con mucha satisfacción de escuchar mucho de lo que se está haciendo. Creo que podemos aprender de lo que están haciendo otros países y de políticas que funcionan. No hace falta inventar nada nuevo. La pobreza infantil está muy estudiada. Tenemos claramente un conocimiento de qué políticas funcionan con evidencia académica. Simplemente hace falta voluntad política para que abordemos ya políticas a día de hoy, como ha dicho también Carlas, para no dejar a ningún niño atrás en esta gran crisis que lamentablemente estamos sufriendo muchos países. Muchas gracias, termino ya, intentamos ser lo más puntuales posibles y esperemos seguir colaborando. Un saludo.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Ricardo. A couple of final remarks before everyone goes. I just want to remind everyone that the questions we didn't get to answer today will be reflected in the follow-up report and indeed over the 3 days. Tomorrow, we will have our final seminar of the week, our webinar at the same time tomorrow. I hope to see you all there again. Remember, keep tweeting about putting children first. That's the hashtag, and I hope to see you tomorrow on the morning of the Day of the Child.